discouraged or question, I think of him, because I have a lot of faith in that man. He showed me what a Christian really could be. And if I could be that for someone else, it would be an honor that I could not imagine. He's a great guy. I've thought many times, Westside is a sending church. We've named many people. Pastor Corzine talked about people that went into the ministry from when he was there with different missionaries. Westside's kind of a sending church musically too. They're people, I kind of thought of 4 or 5 states that I know people this morning were involved in music ministry that got their start doing that here. And I'm honored to have been a part of that. I after having to be last after all the men here, it's like I am just a mope. I have nothing to say, but I am thankful that God's given me the opportunity to serve and to learn in this role. Thanks.
One thing that we have gathered this afternoon is that preachers don't know how to count or check the clock. But that's okay. You're still here, most of you. And we want to we've already been going hour and 45 minutes in this service. That was not the plan, I promise. But I don't want to close this without first giving you the opportunity to do a 4-minute memory. Don't take as long as us, but if you want to share real quickly. And Gabby is going to come. She's going to be my microphone runner. Come on down here, Gabby. And if you would like to share a quick memory, 4 minutes or less, then just wave and we'll send Gabby. All right, that's cool.
Wow, precious memories. I can just remember going to church at the old West Side on Monroe and El Dorado with my grandparents when I was just a little bitty girl. And through the years, went to Baptist church and different things. And then I kind of got away from the Lord, and my children were just a baby and maybe 1.5 years old. And my Aunt Bessie Kinney invited me back to West Side. She invited me to church, and I came and came back the next Sunday. And the next Sunday, she asked me to help her in the 3-year-old class, teaching the 3-year-olds. And I was in that class for 11 years. But that really, after I started doing that, and then I got back into church, and I remember going to the altar on Grand and asking the Lord back into my life. And I found, several people have mentioned the love and the acceptance and the nurturing that I got, the mentoring, learned how to be a Christian and how to love the Lord and serve Him. And I just have special memories of so many people that aren't here anymore. They're up in heaven. But I love this church. I love the Lord, and I'm so glad for my heritage.
Thank you. Well, this is my home church. And I've always said, I think I was born on the front pew. Because as soon as I was born, Mom brought me to church. You know, it wasn't like, well, they might catch something, you know. No, I was at church. And I just, you know, I've been to other churches. I lived in Jacksonville for a while, and the people were great. But it wasn't West Side. I went to Olivet, tried to find a church up there, but West Side. And of all the churches that I've been in and out of, you know, none compares to West Side. And I think it's because of the love and the nurturing that's been mentioned so many times. And one of my dear memories, I remember sitting in the pew, and one of the Hunt girls came up behind me, and she punched me on the back, and she said, "Gloria, would you start a teen quizzing program?" I said, "Oh, honey, I know nothing about that." I said, "Let me go home and pray about it, and then I'll let you know." And I did. I went home and prayed about it. And it was just as plain as day that the Lord said, if there's one young person that wants to get in my word, help them. And so I went back, I think the next Sunday, and I said, "Patty, I'll do it." I said, "I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll do it." And I have had such a blessing out of that, to see kids that, store God's word in their heart, and they come up later on, years later, and talk about what quizzing meant to them. And that has been worth it all. The Lord helped me through that. As green as I was, He helped me through that and touched someone else's life for Him. And I just love Him. I love my church. This is my home. Home away from home. This is my home. And there's nothing that will compare to what Westside has meant to me.
So I was thinking about, Doug mentioned that he was competing with Greg Gates, and then Greg ended up being the minister of music here because you wouldn't come back. So we went and got the competition. Anyway, I'm Scott Jackson. I was here from 1975 to 2006, and I came with actually Larry Feller was the one that worked to get us over to West Side. My brother was getting into a little trouble, and we were looking for a church with a good youth group, and boy, did we come to the right place for that. So I was 16, drove here on Wednesday nights to be in Helen Wilkins' class, and then later, we just became part, and we did a lot of ministry together, didn't we? I love this church. I still love this church. And it's one thing to say that but it's just a label. What I really love is the people, because they're the church. But you guys are great, and I've just had a wonderful time this weekend. It's just been wonderful. And I had a couple of thoughts of people that taught me things. And I only have 4 minutes, so I can't include everybody, but I just wrote a few down. Elsie Buckmaster taught me the beauty of humility. Bob Bennett taught me the value of encouragement. Lorraine Hodge here taught me to sing out. I don't know if she was nagging me or encouraging me, but I took her words to heart. And I learned how to sing out. Pastor Schmidt taught me how to step out on faith because he asked me to do things I couldn't do. Just like everybody else said, God equips the called. He doesn't call the equipped, because I sure wasn't. Glenn Buckmaster gave me a picture of what my ministry might be in retirement. And Maxine Bennett taught me how to face death with courage and dignity. I'll never forget what she went through and the way she did it. And I hope that someday, when I face death, that I can do it as victorious as she did. You never know what's going to happen at one of these things, because in 1993, Pastor Mark Ryan was speaking, and he was talking about the rich history of church planting out of West Side. And that was the moment that God started digging at my heart about being involved in church planting. And it took a long time for me to get that opportunity. But I've been part of 2 church plants now. And so you never know what God is going to do right here and today and what he's been talking to people in their hearts. It could be something quite spectacular. Pastor Todd Keller from Point of Change in Bloomington gives his regards. He wanted me to let you know. Thank you for letting us come down here, and congratulations.
Hi, Lou. I've been here for probably about 7 or 8 years old, and I've always been amazed at the talent in this church, for the size of this church, the musical, the evangelical, the talent has just been amazing. And if you ever want to hear the story, at 2 years old, people from this church came and saved my son's life from dying. Glenn Buckmaster was come pick me up on the bus when I was just a young kid, and you start mentioning names, I'm going to leave them all out. I can't remember them, but one of the nicest, and all the pastors have been great, just all of them. But one day I was at my dad's house, and he was a tough old bird, been a tough old bird his whole life. Grew up through the Depression, went to World War II, and he says, "Bob, I've been watching you for a long time now," and he says, "I want what you got." And it wasn't very long that Pastor Corzine came up to me and says, "Your dad came to see me, and we prayed through, and he's saved, and he's going to heaven." And that's one of the best things I ever heard in my whole life. And, of course, he didn't live a whole lot longer after that. But Pastor Lau, he hadn't been here very long, but here he had to do a funeral for my dad, and he didn't know him. But that was one of the early funerals that you had to do. But this place has meant a lot to me over the years, and I've been here a long time, and I just love everybody here.
Today has meant a lot to me. Reflecting back on all of our pastors and Pastor Smith and Ruth Ann, they were vital when I was a kid. Mom was a single parent, raising me and Rob by ourselves. But Ruth Ann took on the children's department with an energy that you don't see today. Well, you do see it. Susie Heath has taken on our children's ministries. But Ruth Ann had children's Bible quizzing, children's programs that were not programs but productions, literally productions. We would clear out the stage at the old church, and there would be backdrops everywhere that went along with the theme of our production we were going to put on. But she made every kid feel like they were special and they were used by God. And I remember sitting at the parsonage in the lower living room at your house. We were doing children's quizzing, and we were doing it on Exodus, and she had showed us the old Moses movie with Charlton Heston in it as Moses. And she talked to us about how we can be used like Moses if we allow him to work. I was born, like Mom said, on the front pew like she was. She brought us to church as soon as we were born and out of the hospital. But every pastor that's here has played a part in my life. And from the Smiths to the Bushies, Sharon Bushy took us on. They had mentioned it when Brother Bushy talked about going to East St. Louis. We went to the roughest part of St. Louis to minister to kids that were from homes that didn't have a father, that drug abuse. Before we went, Sharon told us teens, she said, "This isn't going to be a youth trip like you have never experienced before." When the Smiths were here, we had a youth pastor called Tim Yates. and he took us to Virginia Beach, and we did productions on our way out there at different churches, and that was a youth trips I'll never forget. But this youth trip was different, and it was something that I never expected. But Michelle and I were dating at the time, and so we were going on this trip, and she said, we're going to hold a vacation Bible school in the worst part of St. Louis, and you're not going to be able to go out at night, and you're not going to be able to go out of the churchyard. You're going to be kind of jailed while we're there. But we went to Fairview Heights Church, and that was where we based that. And then we'd leave there and go to the church where we were holding Vacation Bible School. And these kids, when we left at the end of that week, these kids were crying and holding on to us teens, and they wouldn't let us go. They said, don't leave, please don't leave, because of the life that they were going to go back to when we left. But she taught us that the importance was on a youth trip, not just to have fun for us, and that's all that the youth trip was about, but to be ministers and be on the mission that God sends you on. And that's what our church has been about, is sending missionaries out, whether it be across the world or right here in our hometown, but ministering to folks that they need a Savior. And I can say for everybody, probably beyond a shadow of a doubt, we have had an elite group of pastors over our 100 years. And we wouldn't trade any of them for the world. And thank you for having an impact on my life. And there's different men in the church that's had impacts on me. Ed Reese, Scott Jackson, Bob Bennett, Jim Ballard, Larry Feller, Jeff Fletcher, Charlie Cox. I could go on and name a lot of people. But I'm glad that God led them to our church, and that they have been prime examples for me to pattern my life after, to be a Christian man, to raise his church in the family, and to love the Lord.
My name is Cindy Marshwaller, and I've spoken before about what a wonderful, wonderful place this is. I had the privilege today of sitting next to Bertie and Helen and Janet, and just all of you, Gloria, all the new people, Rosemary Tackerberry, and she's new to me, and everyone. Jim Ballard would take us home in the bus. I came here from 1971 until I kept coming back. I'm a gypsy, so I keep leaving Decatur and coming back. But this is my home. You people are the reason, these people are the reason I have my degree today. You're the reason that my grandchildren are the wonderful women and young men that they are. My daughters are Christians because of this church. My family is just such an important part of me, but this will always be my family. And as Scott said, it has nothing to do with this gorgeous building that we had so much fun TIing with Rachel and Edwin Tackerberry and all the people that worked on it. It has to do with the heart and the soul. And that heart and that soul is Christ. And, you know, I'm so excited to be here and to have Steve as Pastor Steve as my pastor, because he's that vessel and he talks to me. And I know if you know me from being a child, which so many of you do, it's always about me, but it's not. He has been such a blessing, and Peggy, and I've met so many good people. I'm not present all the time. I'm struggling with some things myself, but my heart is always here. And, you know, it's been so fabulous to see Jim and Charlene here, and just so many people. And I love you, and thank you. And my children thank you. My grandchildren thank you, and their children will thank you.
It's hard to take just a few minutes and talk about all the intersections that happened. I was born in 1960. Seems like a long time ago, but from 1960 to 1965, West Side was my church. My grandpa and grandma were Thomas and Ines Hester. And somewhere along the line, when I was 8 or 9 years old, I came to the realization that I had something that was unique that other kids didn't have, and that was that all my aunts and uncles, grandma, grandpa, everybody was a Christian on both sides of the family, dad and mom both. And I attribute that to West Side because that's where grandma and grandpa went, and of course all the girls went. And I got to go too. We weren't a pro-choice family. When the church doors were open, we went. And I don't remember all the people from back then. There were so many that had an influence on me. But I remember names like Grandma Ball and Lester Bumpus. And I remember the Hodges. And I remember the Jacksons, of course. And just so many more. I remember Reverend Hughes. And then as I got older, I'd come back to Decatur in the summer and stay with grandma and grandpa, and I'd detassel corn. And it was quite an experience. And we would get up early and go do that. And then I remember youth leaders like Terry Lambright, who I later saw in Colorado Springs. I remember Friday nights and Saturday nights when Scott Jackson and I would cruise El Dorado. And our music that we had on at an extremely loud level, and I'm not sure it was theologically correct, but we certainly were heard throughout the city. But you know, I thank West Side and all of you, and I don't know how many people are here from back that far ago, but it doesn't really matter because it continues to build and it continues to go, and I firmly believe that the best days for West Side are ahead. And while it's great to think back and relive memories, and one of the neatest things that I think God gives us are memories, but He's a God that moves forward. And this building isn't here today just for us to remember what happened in the past, but the fact that you're here, that you're a vital part of this community, means that God has something in store, and I believe that the best days are the days ahead, even better than those that we think about today. So I thank each one of you, and I just pray that you'll remain faithful and strong and move ahead, and I believe God will do great things beyond your wildest imagination.
My name's Vicki Williams. I came all the way here from Alabama for this thing today. And I have some wonderful memories of being a teenager here. I was growing up in this church, but I really remember my teenage years and being one of Terry's terrific teens. And Janet Jackson and Helen Wilkins always have a special place in my heart. They were two women that really cared about me.
My memory is very, very different from what you're all talking about. Although I can relate, I really can relate to what you're saying, but does anybody remember the July 4th, 1976 service? Somebody does. They had decided to celebrate our country with 200 years. They were going to have a look like a cake. I do believe it was styrofoam, wasn't it? Okay. It was styrofoam. But they put 200 candles on, and they fit beautifully. I mean, it looked perfect, and everybody was so pleased that they got all the candles on. But they didn't account for, once they lit them, all the heat. Well, when the choir came out of the back room to the choir loft, we just saw this big ball of fire on the platform. because we had this right on the platform. Well, Reverend Hughes went over and he started blowing the candles. And Terry walked over with his choir book and he just kind of started waving it. And I think it took somebody else, the three of them, to finally get the fire out. But they did, and there was no damage to the church.
Well, the preachers like it when you say there's a ball of fire in the pulpit. They like that. So, okay, Gabby, got a couple more. We get one or two more, and then we'll close. Okay, cool.
I'm Lynn Hill Utter, and I was one of those kids that was pretty much born in this church thanks to this lady sitting right next to me. Shortly before I was born, she got pretty much our entire family back in the church, and that's a whole nother story. But I have so many fond memories of this church. The people that were in it, all the names that were mentioned, you just, your face just lights up thinking of all those wonderful people, and sinking my canoe, and just so many fun things. But I think one of the most important memories I have was when I was 12, and Dwayne and Ruth Ann Schmidt were our pastors, and that was the time that I accepted Jesus into my heart. And he did I don't even remember what it's called, but the little discipleship basic Bible study. I remember working on those with him, and the impact that he's had. When they moved to Portage, my sister went and was his secretary for a while. And I look around and I see, Charlene Ballard made our wedding cake when I got married, and Lorraine and Janet, and just all the faces that just mean so much, and even the times when my beautiful mama made me come to church when I didn't want to, and I'm so thankful for that, and for the heritage that this church and every one of the people that are sitting in here has given to me and my family and to my boys. I'm proud to be a fourth generation Nazarene, and raising the fifth. And we're excited about what Westside has meant to us and what is in store for you guys for these the next 100 years. And thank you for letting us be a part of it, and for sharing in our history and the things that you guys have done for us.
We're done. Didn't Gabby do a great job? Yay, Gabby. We're Gabby, it's your grandma. We have to let her.
She goes, oh no. I'm a crier, so I'll get that out of the way. I'm Ellie Case, used to be Banning. My mom was Florence Baldridge. My grandmother, who I never met, did go to the church on Monroe in El Dorado. And my mom and her brothers were in the radio show. And I just want Pastor Smith to know, you had such an impact on my life. I had such a hard time as a young married person with my children. I'm sorry. And you gave me besides counseling towards God, you and my cousin. Do you remember Ann Baldridge? I remember a trip that we took to Springfield and had dinner on the church bus. I have no idea why or what, but we had a good time. And some of the words of wisdom that you gave me, life words of wisdom, was that I couldn't change the actions of others. I could only change my reaction. And I hold those words still today. And I thank you a lot. And Pastor Steve, thank you. Your church is always so welcoming. And Kenny and I have had a hard time. Everybody knows that. But God has made such great strides in our life and changes, and our families in church. And now we're down to the 5th generation being here in church. And I want to thank everybody.
I'll be much quicker than my mother. My maiden name was Jamie Losi. I was born in this church as well. Grew up with Danielle, so it's always great to see her. I just want to say thank you because we currently attend here, and everybody has welcomed us with open arms, open hearts. I always went to children's camp at Nazarene Acres. I'm very, very excited for my daughter to get to go to church camp this year at Camp Warren. So we look forward to hearing her stories and her memories that she has. I hope that she grows up remembering all the wonderful things that we do. Thank you, Pastor Steve, also, because you've been such an impact on our lives. We got away from the church, and we came back, thanks to my mom. And you've done nothing but to be there for us no matter what, whether it be a Facebook message, whether coming to Gabby's swim meets. That just means so much to us that we know that you love us as much as we love you.
Well, we're going to break and go eat again. It's supper time, almost. Depends on which. You're awake again. No, we're in just a minute. We're gonna close with a song that just seems appropriate. Danielle, if you want to start working your way over, and I've asked Doug to lead us. One of the things that in preparation for today, and I've shared this with a couple of people, I said I've heard stories about the Old West Side and on what God did on Monroe, and some great stories. And I put together the slideshow that many of you saw last night, and maybe some of you saw it today on the monitor out in the foyer. And while I don't know faces or anything, and as I was going through all these photos, I didn't know hardly anyone in those photos. I recognized just a couple of people because I had seen something else with their name on it. And this is as true of anything I've ever said in my life. I didn't know who was who, and I prayed, Lord, help me to choose the right pictures. Please don't let me choose a picture that we're going to put in a slideshow of some ornery, cantankerous person who split the church in 1934. And he answered evidently, because several of you have shared with me about the slideshow and how someone had mentioned, said they sat there and watched it last night and with tears, remembering. And some of you have shared that slideshow, just looking at that, and I'm sure in your conversations, remembering people who laid the foundation for us. And when we come to a reunion service, a homecoming service like this, invariably we think about that person who meant so much to us that's not here anymore. But the good news is there's a time somewhere in the future when we're going to have a grand homecoming. And it just seems appropriate that we close our time